America is home to 33 million small businesses, the beating heart of communities across the country.
And proof that the American dream is still alive.
This is a show about those dreamers and doers and the communities they serve.
Their real life stories.
Their struggles and successes.
Their grit, determination, and passion.
And the people who fight
to keep their American dream alive.
I'm Alfredo Ortiz.
I'm Elaine Parker.
And it's time for another episode of Main Street Matters,
America's small business megaphone.
Hi, and welcome to another episode of Main Street Matters, America's small business megaphone. I'm Elaine Parker, the president of the Job Creators Network Foundation. And today we're joined by John Tillman. John is one of the nation's most prominent leaders in the free market public policy arena. He's the CEO of American Culture Project, which is an organization that attracts, educates, and mobilizes independent voters around the ideas of freedom and opportunity. John, welcome to the show.
Elaine, great to be with you. Thanks for having me.
Tell us a little bit about American Culture Project.
We're focused on engaging particularly independent and swing voters, soft left of center voters, soft right of center voters, and engaging them in the public dialogue of the day on whatever the issues may be, with a couple particular focuses. We're very focused on the challenges of government unions, and in particular teachers unions, and the outsized power they have to influence public policy in what I think is a corrupt way. So we do a lot of work to make sure that the voting public, and especially those swing voters, understand the nature of teachers unions and the power they wield, as opposed to teachers in the classroom, which are two different things. That's a key part of our focus. Corey DeAngelis is a senior fellow with our C3 side, American Culture Foundation, working on that issue in particular. And then secondly, we're very focused on engaging voters. So we identify voters during elections, and we educate them over time, not only on the issues. We test a whole variety of messages to see which issues and which messaging framing moves voters to vote for the liberty agenda versus the statist collectivist agenda. And then we do a lot of work, both directly and indirectly, to turn out those voters at election time.
I think that's great. You're focused on a very small sliver of the American public, that they always call it a small sliver, but I actually think it's a bigger piece of the puzzle than people realize. And I think you're right to focus in that area, because I feel like Americans are just sort of tired of the far partisan gamesmanship stuff that kind of takes us in the wrong direction, where we've been going at, the last 4 years, of course. I mean, the socio-cultural issues that we've seen happen, and the economic side of things, it's like we're in the upside down world, and we're finally coming out of it and getting, we can at least see normalcy on the horizon. And I would think that you're getting a lot of people interested in that type of message from both sides.
We are, and I think one of the key points of this entire strategy that we've been doing now for many years is that the way you hear the sort of persuadable middle, the soft left, soft right, and the people in the middle, people talk about it as if it's a monolithic group, and it is anything but that. It's very much not monolithic. There are many subsets and slices, and also who's in that middle changes over time. So I'll give you a really couple good examples. We did a huge research project in 2024 on the voting habits of African American men. And so most people would not think of them as part of this contingent, but they absolutely were. We spent hundreds of thousands of dollars convening focus groups with African-American men, Hispanics, younger couples that are married with children, single females, and did a whole bunch of qualitative research. Then we did a whole bunch of quantitative research to try to create some understanding of how these things scale in terms of different issues. And what we learned is that there are many African-American men in particular who are very open to voting conservatively, if you will, if you approach them in the right way with the right issue set. But if you approach different groups within that persuadable middle in the same exact way, you're going to repel them rather than attract them. And this is part of the artistry of what we do, a very data-driven deep dive on the analytics of how you actually move and persuade different subsets of voters.
So what's the winning message? What was the winning message with African American men? Because, we saw it famously, Obama kind of chastise a group of them like, what are you doing kind of thing. And yet they really came out for Trump in a way that we hadn't seen. I mean, Trump won the Hispanic male vote outright in this
55%,
election.
exactly. Yeah.
So what's the winning message there?
There is no one winning message, but one of the messages that jumped off the table, if you will, had a very big response rate was parental rights, fathers' rights in particular. We were really shocked by this. Nobody had this on our bingo card. We weren't going into it thinking that this was going to be something we'd even look at, but it emerged in the qualitative research we did. A lot of discussion that just popped up randomly without prompting on how frustrated African American men feel about their access to their children. They want to be engaged. They want to be fathers in the traditional sense. You know, the people, white and black alike, brown alike, in consuming media gain a perception because of the terrible way the media portrays the African American community. It is not monolithic, and the bad stuff that goes on in that community that we're all too much aware of in major cities in particular, where you have family breakdown, community breakdown, and dysfunction. That is the dominant narrative in the media, and it really frustrates people who are working. No, don't forget, a vast majority of African American men are working, being productive, have aspirations like everybody else. And one of those aspirations is they want to be involved in their children's lives. And so parental rights, parents' rights, fathers' rights was an issue that we just never saw coming and really moved them.
That's really interesting. John McLaughlin, one of our pollsters, national pollster, and one of Trump's pollsters, told me after the election on the Hispanic vote, because we were really involved in getting the Hispanic votes and working through Hispanic Christian pastors.
Mm-hmm.
He said, we rented the Hispanic vote. It's a great turnout. 46% of Hispanics voted for Trump. Hispanic men outright, but we rented it. And so we have to keep engaging with that community. And unfortunately, conservatives are not very good at that.
I think this is first of all, I know John and have great respect for him. I've worked with him in the past, and he's exactly correct. I think this is one of the mistakes that almost anybody winning elections makes. Biden made it in 2020. Obama made it in 2008. Trump, to some degree, didn't make it in 2016 because of the nature of that election, but he's making it a little bit. His people are making it a little bit now in 2024, which is what I call the confusion between a validation election and a repudiation election. This was a little bit of both, but if you go back and look, when Ronald Reagan won in 1980, going to the Wayback Machine, that was a repudiation of Jimmy Carter. When he won in 1990 or 1984, that was a validation election. When George Bush won in 88, that was a validation election. When Clinton won in 92, that was repudiation. And when he won in 96, that was validation. People misunderstand what these are. And I think Trump is overreading it, and his people are overreading it as a validation election. It's not a validation election. It was absolutely repudiation of the Biden's 4 years. And to some degree, there's a little bit of validation. People did vote for the border. People did vote for getting waste and corruption and fraud out of government, all of these. And people did vote for peace and a less aggressive war-making foreign policy. But it's not like, but those were all, as John said, sort of rented. And so the people that put Trump in, you have to continue to win them over. The way that Clinton and Reagan both got validated in their reelects, and the reason Florida, I believe you're in Orlando and I have a home in Naples, the reason that Florida has gone from being a purple swing state to now being a solidly red state is because Republicans won and rented those votes in much the same way, and then they delivered on the policies that made people's lives better. And the jury's out as to whether these narrow Republican majorities in the House and the Senate, along with President Trump, are going to put policies in place that convert those rentals into a long-term ownership model.
I like your terminology. Yeah. So let's change to economics. Obviously, economics played a huge role in the November election with all communities, Hispanic, Black, I mean, you name it. People wanted to change. I do think there was somewhat of not just repudiation vote, but it was also a sort of we tried this guy before and it worked. Mm-hmm. So I think he had a lot of credibility coming in to say, right. Hey, I mean, like, I'm not just telling you what I'm going to do. I did it. and you did well under me. So your op-ed talks about the lowest unemployment rates under the first Trump administration was with Black and Hispanic men ever. They had the lowest unemployment rates under the first Trump term, and wages, of course, rising at a far faster clip for blue collar workers than white collar workers, which means the middle class was finally getting ahead under the Trump administration and those kinds of policies. So good news last night. The big, beautiful bill passed through the House, as you know, which changes our entire conversation. Not really, because we still have to get it to the president's desk. But talk to us about some of the highlights there and what you see. You wrote about a lot of things that you were hopeful for in your op-ed, but now you've seen them come through in legislation. Talk to us about that.
Well, there's a lot of people quibbling about this bill, that it's not perfect. It doesn't lock in the DOJ waste, fraud, and abuse cuts. And I think all those are legitimate criticisms, but I think they're missing the larger point. First of all, passing legislation in general is a very, very hard thing to do. And it's really hard when you have a diverse caucus, as the Republicans do, between moderates and hardcore fiscal and full spectrum conservatives. So I give Speaker Johnson a tremendous amount of credit for getting this over the finish line. People seem to forget that politics is the art of compromise. You have to compromise. People are objecting to the SALT bailouts, if you will, to the high tax blue states that are going to be, quote unquote, be paid for by the red states. This is how you get votes. You've got to get those blue state Republicans to vote for your bill, and they're going to extract value that benefit their constituents. This is how politics has always worked. So I'm very pragmatic about the compromises. So let's then talk about what's great about this. And first of all, what's great about it is it locks in the 2017 tax cuts. We won't have a tax increase as a result of this passing, assuming the Senate passes it. The Senate has already passed unanimously, and I'm just still shocked by this, no taxes on tipped wages. And to me, this is another example of, I always refer to myself as a pragmatic purist. I'm definitely a purist, but I'm a pragmatist. I played sports my whole life, and I was particularly focused on football in my high school years and played a lot of football. And if you were moving the ball toward the goal line, you're winning, especially if you're doing it in good chunks. Not taxing tipped wages or not taxing overtime wages is not perfect tax reform. It is not holistic supply side tax reform that a lot of the economists on the intellectual right want, but it is absolutely directionally correct. And in general, coming back to the purpose of the Job Creators Network and what I care about with entrepreneurship, all of this is great for small business capital formation. When you reduce taxes on the margin for middle class and working class people with those two things, for example, tipped wages, and in general retain the lower marginal rates that the 2017 tax rates put into place, that allows working class and upper middle class people to save money to start a business. And the vast majority of small businesses are started out of personal savings and friends and family. So this is pro-growth in every respect. And remember, every large business that you patronize today started out as a small business with that type of capital formation. And that's why I'm very optimistic about this bill, and hopefully it'll get through the reconciliation process somewhat unscathed.
What's your thought about the SALT compromise, 40,000?
Well, Elaine, it's really funny that you mentioned this. I remember saying years ago that I'm very much a laissez-faire, quasi-libertarian in many of my thoughts. I hated the idea of the government putting in mandates on no cigarette smoking in bars and restaurants. I thought it was wrong and unconstitutional. But gosh, I sure enjoyed it once the smokers were out of the restaurants where I was trying to eat my nice steak dinner. And I sort of feel the same way about this situation, because I have a home in very high tax Illinois. The cap of $10,000 cost me tens of thousands of dollars in additional taxes that I pay every year than from what I used to pay. And so the idea that I'm personally going to benefit from that, I can't help but say I've done the math. It's going to be good for me. But I do think the SALT caps were the right thing to do. And I think rewarding the high tax states like Illinois, New York, California is a mistake. But nevertheless, the bottom line is you had to give that up in order to get the votes out of the blue states. And that's what they did. Pragmatism.
Don't you think, though, that these some of these congressmen in the blue states, the Republican congressmen, should work on educating their constituents in their states that they voted in the government that has the high taxes? And if they could change that at that level, then we wouldn't need a SALT deduction at all.
Yeah, this that's such a great question, and it reminds me of Josh Hawley putting out bills now that are sympathetic to unions and giving union bosses more power. He has misinterpreted. I'll come back to the point about SALT, and I want to connect the two thoughts here in terms of how politicians process these public issues. Josh Hawley sees a working class and union voters voting Republican, and he thinks that what he has to do is give unions more power to instead of renting those voters, get them to convert to ownership, right? That is a complete misreading of the situation. They're not voting because they want the government to give more union power. They're voting for the rest of the agenda: peace instead of war, closed border instead of open border, fairness for women in sports instead of having biological men take women's opportunities in athletics at the high school and collegiate level. These are the things that are converting those voters. In the same way, these Republicans in these blue states, they think they have to essentially sell out and go to their voters and say, "Hey, we got you the SALT deduction back, and you're going to get the max deduction." That's not going to put their district at risk, their seat at risk. What they should be doing is exactly what you said. They should be going to the table and saying, what we need to do is lower our tax burden by, instead of voting for the Democrats that raise your taxes and put us in this position, putting in Republicans who are lower your tax burden. But frankly, that's a harder sell. It requires some intellectual capacity and messaging capacity by a lot of Republicans. So they take the lazy way out and negotiate, and I think it's very disappointing. It goes to one of my rules of politics. It's analogous to all of this, which is, when Democrats win elections, they can't wait to implement their agenda, no matter how small their majority. And when Republicans win elections, they can't wait to equivocate on their agenda, no matter how large their majority. And we're seeing some of that in this budget negotiation.
To your point about Josh Hawley and the union point, I read your op-ed on that legislation as well, and I couldn't agree more. And that, I think that was such a fundamental point to make, is that Trump did win a lot of the union vote, but it wasn't about winning the union. It was about winning the workers. And so you can be anti-union, but pro-worker, 100%.
Well, I stand here as one of them. I was the founder and chairman of Liberty Justice Center when we won the Janus case in 2018 that freed 5 million government workers from having to pay union fees when they had opted out of the union, and it was created compelled speech. But what so many people miss is that, and Josh Hawley is certainly among them, but there are many others. They buy the other side's talking points. It's amazing to me how many Republicans, this is what has made President Trump so different, and certainly made this term so different than his first term. He accepts no premises. He does not accept settled wisdom, settled thought, settled science, if you will, or settled politics. He is a disruptor in every sense. And there's too many people on the right who want to accept the left's narrative about the rules of the game, the context and framing of issues, and when we should be rejecting it. And I think one of the things that's been so refreshing between Secretary Bessent, Rubio, who's just been shockingly good. I had no idea Marco Rubio was this skilled. It's truly impressive. And there are so many others, my good friend Brooke Rollins at AG, they're all are so good in the media and not accepting the premises of the media. And there are so many Republicans who could learn from that. It requires intellectual rigor, and it requires confidence. And I think that's part of the problem. If you go back to one of my other rules of politics, is there's two kinds of politicians. There's the ones who become a politician to advance a policy agenda. Those people are fluid on the issues, and they don't need a whole lot of briefing papers because they know it cold and they came into it to advance the policy agenda. The second kind of politician is the one who adopts a policy agenda to fuel his political ambitions. That means they have no core, and so they're not as confident discussing the issues because they're learning them in order to try to get votes and build constituencies that'll keep them in office. And those are empty, vacuous people. Unfortunately, the Republicans have a number of those.
We've worked a lot with former Governor Doug Ducey on education and some other initiatives when he was in office, and now working with him on education freedom, school choice throughout the states. He's a chair on one of our education projects. We also had former Governor Sununu speak at our recent summit and gala. He was on our debt and deficit panel, and he was also on the podcast. And so I've spoke with him several times, And he is that. They are both those politicians. I mean, they absolutely understand the issues. It's about policy agenda for them. They can sit down and talk about any issue from great depths. It's incredible to speak to either one of them and hear what they have to say on different issues. And I love talking to governors too, because while they're managing a microcosm of the federal government, they are the CEO of an entire state, and I feel like they actually can do more than a president can because it's one state.
I've spent time with Governor Ducey and Sherrier and Sununu both at a variety of events. And in fact, I have talked to Governor Ducey about perhaps getting involved in my project to build an Entrepreneurial Hall of Fame, which we call the Hall of Giants. Both of them are what you've mentioned. And I think, and of course, Doug Ducey was an entrepreneur himself before he got into politics. I think the Cold Stone Creamery, if I remember right.
Yes.
A great guy. So, and it is really interesting when you talk to governors, because they have a very different mindset versus legislators. And certainly within the legislative body, there are alphas and betas, but there are very few betas who are governors.
That's a good point. I think they make great presidents, but I would imagine as a governor who's been a governor of a state, if you've been a governor of a state, particularly a conservative state that does financially well and is fiscally sound, to go into the federal government must just be a level of frustration that probably not many people can understand.
I've been enjoying Lee Zeldin, who, as you know, former congressman who ran for governor in New York at the EPA. He's an alpha, and he has been sure fun to watch. And you can see the frustration with the idiocy that goes on in these federal agencies, such as the EPA.
He was at our summit as well, and he is just fantastic. He was on our regulations panel, and he, of course, you've heard the stories in the media of what he's uncovered in terms of waste, fraud, and abuse at the EPA, which is incredible to me. But he was so funny because he said, I want to get to a point where we're selling T-shirts that say, "I love the EPA."
Wow, that's a heavy lift. That day, that'll be one of the all-time great transformations I've ever seen.
I know, but at the same time, when you hear about what he's uncovering, you just want to hear more because it's so preposterous, and the guy's funny too, the way he tells it. So it was a great summit. You'll have to come to our next one.
This whole experience of watching these amazing people go in at the secretarial level to these different departments, and the whole Doge experiences for political junkies, it's one of the greatest voyeuristic experiences of our lives right here in the public. It's hilarious what they are finding, and shocking what they are finding. It blows me away. Between the NSA having these very provocative chat rooms, to the kind of spending and the money going into trans teaching and events in Europe that we're funding. It just goes on and on with these bizarre things that our taxpayer dollars were going for.
Well, it's interesting to watch, the detractors, the Democrats, specifically the Democrats who are against any of these cuts. They're very careful they're so skilled in messaging. They're just so skilled. They're very careful not to defend the program, but to defend the constitutionality of what's happening. And it's like, well, nothing's been cut. Let's just start there. Nothing's been cut. It's been uncovered and put on a list of, hey, we should cut this. Doge doesn't have any power to cut, but boy, have they uncovered incredible waste. And even in the tax bill, they're, claiming that Medicaid's being cut. Well, it's not being cut. What they found was tremendous waste and fraud of people, able-bodied people that are on Medicaid that could go get a job. We have more jobs available than people, as always, because we have a skills deficit. And so if we can get those people off Medicaid and into jobs, it's good for them. It's good for their community. It's good for the country. It's good for the economy. It's good for our debt and deficit. I could go on and on about what it's good for. And the Democrats will have nothing to do with that. They just want to protect the status quo. And in fact, continue down that road of more spending. There is no level of cut that's okay for them. Nothing.
The Republicans need to do a better job. I think Medicaid is a really good example that the places they want to reform Medicaid is they don't want to have able-bodied men in particular taking up benefits that otherwise would be going to the most vulnerable among us. And we need to frame it that way. Every time, we're reforming Medicaid to ensure that the most vulnerable people among us, our elderly, our poor and disadvantaged, people who have no access to health care, people are struggling to try to get on their feet and live their life, who have health issues. They are being crowded out right now by bros in their 20s, 30s, and 40s who don't want to work and are milking the system. Are you for that? I'm not for that. I'm for the poor elderly person who needs health care. I'm for the new legal immigrant who's doing it the right way, who needs help. I'm for the brown and black people and the white people, regardless of their race, their ethnicity, their urban or ruralness. I'm for those Americans having access to care. And I'm for those who are capable of taking care of themselves, especially younger men in their 20s, 30s, and 40s, taking care of themselves and not taking benefits away from the most vulnerable. That's what I'm for. What are you for? That's how they should be framing this. And I'm shocked they're not doing more of that.
Well, I think we need to get you on the phone with them, because the way you just framed it is exactly how they should be framing it. I mean, it's perfect. It's incredible to me how they can talk about we're kicking, millions of people off of Medicaid for tax cuts for billionaires. Well, that couldn't be further from the truth. Like I said, they're so skilled at their messaging, and then of course they have a complacent media that's willing to carry their water. I mean, it's all a snowball effect for them that's helpful. But I guess we could talk for hours about the media and the messaging and all of that stuff. Before I let you go, I want to talk about your Entrepreneur Hall of Fame and what you're doing there, because I think it's very exciting, and I think I hope you're going to put it in Orlando. Since it's a little bit of an amusement park too.
Well, Orlando's on our list. Orlando, Miami, Nashville, Detroit, Philadelphia Atlanta are among the many places on the list. We have some other locations we're looking at as well. So we haven't decided where yet. We're at the beginning of the process. So we've been in the planning stages now for a little over 2 years to learn how you build a 200,000 or 300,000 square foot entertainment facility. But the way I like to describe it, Elaine, is a little bit rock and roll. Hall of Fame meets Hollywood meets Disney World. And so we want it to be an immersive, experiential entertainment complex. It'll have an associated hotel and a conference center with it. It'll have an education facility that teaches the principles of entrepreneurship, teaches how important our free enterprise and capitalist system are to allowing entrepreneurs to flourish. But the most important thing we want to do is we want to remind the American people that literally every physical thing in your life, other than your body, exists. The chair you're sitting in, the clothing that you're wearing, the necklace that you're wearing around your neck right now, Elaine, and everybody that's watching, every physical thing, tangible thing in their life exists because an entrepreneur at some point decided to start a business with one goal in mind, and that is to serve other people well. The essence of entrepreneurship in our free enterprise system is that you succeed when you serve other people well. And when you do it really well, you can become wealthy. And when you become wealthy, everybody imagines these wealthy people like Jeff Bezos and Mark Zuckerberg sitting on their piles of cash. That's not what actually happens. What happens is that money is tied up and reinvested in future entrepreneurs and in our economic system. And that is how you actually, and why, when you have good capital formation like that, you see poor people's wages rising faster than upper income people. And what you talked about at the beginning of our discussion is when you see wages among the poor and middle class rising faster than everyone else's above them, that's how you beneficially close the income gap. And entrepreneurs are the driving engine of that. We want to celebrate them. We want to create a renewed reverence for and respect for the entrepreneurs who make our lives better every day.
I love it. And I would love to nominate somebody who's our founder, who we lost in November, Bernie Marcus, who is near and dear to my heart. I worked for Bernie for a very long time. I spent a lot of time with him. And, one thing that he knew was that JCN was, one of his legacy projects, but it was, and everybody who works for JCN, our CEO on down, it's a mission for us. This isn't just a job. And when we do expand our family, that's one of the things that I say to people, and we say to people is, look, this isn't just a paycheck. And frankly, we're not the highest, we're not here to make millions, of course, but this is a mission for us. This is something that we do 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. And that we're focused on advocating for small businesses, and they are the driving force in this economy. And that is what Bernie believed. And while I always say we're founded by Bernie Marcus, the co-founder of the Home Depot, and people look at me like, well, I thought you were focused on small business. Well, the Home Depot was a small business, and you have to think about when he started his business. And I mean, I traveled the country with him, and he would tell me his stories about, when he was first starting the company and working, 17 hours a day. And he said he'd be in the stores, and if he saw somebody, who walked into the store and then walked out empty-handed, he'd follow them out to the store and say, why? What didn't we meet? That, what didn't we have? What did you need? And he said, he gave me a specific story of a woman who walked out and said, well, I needed this product and you didn't have it. And he said, well, I'm going to order it for you and I'm going to call you. And he did exactly that. And he brought her back to the store. I mean, that's how involved he was. And he also told me the funny stories about, they didn't have the money to have inventory on the shelves. These are the stories of entrepreneurs that when you hear them, you're like, wow, how did you survive? They didn't have the money to buy inventory, but they had this big warehouse store that if you looked like you had a lot of stuff, people wanted to come and see what your stuff was, right? And so he made these deals with his vendors, the paint companies and other companies, to send empty paint cans. And then he stacked them high to the ceiling so it looked like he had tons of paint, when in fact he didn't, because he couldn't afford to buy it. And one of the things, his focus was how many jobs he created, not only within Home Depot, but the do-it-yourselfers and the small contractors that were able to come and they were customers of Home Depot and build their own businesses. It was incredible to hear those stories from Bernie directly. And really understand entrepreneurism at its best. And that's why he started JCN, was to focus on the next guy or girl with the next big idea like he had, because we wouldn't want to miss out on those big ideas. And so that's why this is a mission.
First of all, Bernie will be a first ballot inductee for sure. I've long been an admirer. I've read all about the history of Home Depot long before I knew you and long before I decided to build a Hall of Giants celebrating people like Bernie. I'm a former retailer myself, and so I really relate to a lot of the stories I read about with Bernie, and I wish I'd gotten to know him personally. I have to say, Elaine, watching you talk about Bernie, it is the most animated and lit up you have been during our entire discussion. Your love of that man and what he's accomplished in his life.
I miss him.
It really comes across, and it's a beautiful thing. And the thing that you said is, think about how service focused he was. His job was to solve that woman's problem. And that's what entrepreneurs do. They want to solve other people's problems by serving them well. And that is the greatest thing about our system, about entrepreneurs, about free enterprise and capitalism. The other side, who believes in the government as the central authority to solve problems, it doesn't do the same thing. No one's walking out of a government building chasing the customer who had to walk away and didn't get serviced well, figuring out how to help them out. They don't care because the incentives are misaligned. In our free enterprise system, with entrepreneurs as the driving engines of it, it creates perfect alignment of incentives, and it's a beautiful thing. And by the way, if people want to learn more about all these things I'm involved with, they can go to a website called thecommandingheights.com. I have a variety of things I'm involved with there. And of course, I'm on the X platform at John M. Tillman, and our website for American culture is amculture.org.
Thecommandingheights.com. That's the name of the website? Okay,
yes,
great.
That's sort of my catch-all where all the different projects I'm involved with are listed.
Well, John, thank you so much for joining us. I love the conversation. I'm glad we finally got to meet sort of in person.
Yes, absolutely.
Instead of just on the phone. It was wonderful talking to you. And thank you all for taking the time to join into Main Street Matters, America's small business megaphone. Main Street Matters is part of the Salem Podcast Network. New episodes debut every Wednesday and Friday. You can find the audio version anywhere you get your podcast from, and you can watch the show on Job Creators Network channels on YouTube and Rumble. And we'll be back soon with another episode. Bye for now.